Hey everybody, welcome back to SaaS Founder Stories. My name is David Brennan, and today I have the great honor of having Dr. Vaughan Shanks. He's the co-founder and CEO of Cydarm Technologies. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
So let's start off. Tell me a little bit about Cydarm and what you guys do.
So, Cydarm is a company that I founded a few years ago now. And what we do is we're on a mission to make cybersecurity operations better and faster. And we do that not by trying to automate everybody out of a job, which is the more tried and tested sort of method. And I should say tested and not well executed or hasn't been very successful. What we do is we focus on these two core tenets that human collaboration and the preservation of human agency are critical success factors for effective cybersecurity operations. And so to that end, we've built our platform around case management. We still automate. There's no point getting people to do repetitive deterministic tasks, but the core of the platform is about that collaboration, decision making, and record keeping.
Very cool. And how did you get into it?
Well, some years ago, I was working for a US based vendor out of California, and I was working for their Australian office. And I was over on a trip, sitting in a meeting room one sunny Tuesday afternoon and watching a demo of this amazing Cyber Fusion platform. And it had histograms and timelines and link analysis, and the demonstrated this amazing really thorough analysis of a data breach situation in about 2 minutes that would have taken a typical analyst probably 2 hours using traditional methods. And sitting back, pretty amazed by the demo. And then there was a call for questions. And I said, well, that was really awesome. But what happens next? And he looked at me blankly and he said, well, you call someone, you tell them you had an incident. I said, well, that's not really how it works. Like you need to have records kept. There's usually accountability. There's the whole response piece. We haven't solved that. I said, I love what you've done here, but we haven't really closed the loop. We haven't solved the customer's complete problem. And that's when it started to dawn on me that there was maybe a job to be done here. And so I spoke to a few friends. I used to work in the Australian Department of Defence, and so I know a number of folks who work in security operations in and out of government these days. And what I found out is people are solving this problem in very ad hoc ways using generic ITSM software, generic Office software, and generally speaking, not very happy with how their workflow goes.
So once you realized that, what was the first steps in kicking off the company?
Well, it was another 18-ish or 18 months or 2 years before I started a company. And actually, what precipitated the company was down here we had an accelerator program, something the likes of which had never happened before, an accelerator specifically dedicated to cybersecurity startups. And I heard about it I was already thinking about starting my own company, and I heard about this company through a podcast I used to listen to. And I immediately contacted the founder of the accelerator and said, I want in. And that was my critical moment. I'm from a software engineering background. I'm not kidding myself. I knew very little about business, and I thought the accelerator would be the perfect on-ramp for this world of startups.
That's awesome. I think that's such a great route to go because I think when you first if you have the development understanding that, sales, marketing, customer success, all of that's the part that you can really easily learn if you're in a good accelerator. So that's very cool. Before the show, you and I were chatting a little bit about the last 6 months for you guys in 2023, and I'm really excited to learn about your experience. I know it must have been pretty tough having to go through the old money crunch that happened to a lot of founders. So set me up and tell me a little bit about where you guys were at and how you got into having to let go a bunch of your team and reducing your size.
Yeah, so we had a rough year in 2023. I remember reflecting at the end of the year and sharing with the team that we certainly weren't alone. A lot of startups had a really rough time in 2023. Interest rates were up, raising capital was high, the economy was tight, hard to find customers. Just through sheer bad luck, some things happened, and we found that we were way out over our skis in terms of our spending relative to what we were making in revenue, and it was just really hard to raise in 2023. The fundraising environment was quite flat, and so we had to cut costs. We had to downsize, and extremely painful to do that. We had to cut our development team to the bone, and what we're left with is a very small core team of developers. And we've built quite a sophisticated product, and so I was trying to figure out how we were going to possibly continue maintaining and enhancing this product with such a small team. And what we did was just really focus on doing one thing at a time. And it all became about focus. And I know you can read this in startup textbooks that it's all about focus. But there's nothing quite the same as having it happen to you and to learn this lesson deeply and for it to go deep into your bones. And I think prior to that, we had a large team. It's very tempting to say we're going to do 3 or 4 different projects at once. And you have these individual missions that people are on and or that smaller sub teams are working on. And I think the risk there is that you end up with 3 or 4 outcomes that don't quite meet world-class standard. And so when you're an early stage company and you're competing against large global players, mediocrity is just not enough. You really need to be the best at one specific thing or 2 specific things. If you try to be good at 4 or 5 things, you'll be 80% at all of them, and that is just not good enough to solve the user's problem and to be worth considering. So it forced us to focus, and paradoxically, somehow over the course of the year, we've somehow been almost more productive with a smaller team. There's probably also an element of team dynamic there that when you have a much smaller team, the lines of communication are simpler, easier to coordinate people, less mistakes get made. But yeah, having that focus has really been a game changer for us.
So for you guys, how'd you go about like setting it up so you're heavily focused on one thing? Did you build out like processes on it? Tell me a little bit more about actually creating that.
We've always worked in sprints, so we follow a process that's roughly aligned with Scrum. So agile software dev. We run 2 week sprints. I think at one point we cut it back to 1 week sprints to get really laser focused and delivering very thin slices of outcomes at the end. And really, for me, what a sprint is about, it's not about. I think it's very easy to misinterpret the goal of a sprint and say, oh, we're sprinting. That means we must be doing stuff very, very quickly and we're setting some kind of arbitrary deadline that you've got 2 weeks to finish some mammoth task. And that's not the point. I think the point is to say for the next 2 weeks, we're going to block out everything else. And you need a very disciplined team, a very disciplined person running that sprint. Uh, Basically, keep everybody laser focused on a single goal. And the other thing I learned is that having 100% utilization is sometimes counterproductive. It's often better if you've got a single focus and everyone on the team is trying to deliver one outcome, and really only 1 or maybe 2 people at a time are on that critical delivery path. And the rest of the team might be almost, if you like, waiting for someone to finish, their part of the API or their part of the front end or something, so that they can build the next leg in that solution. And then the people that are not on that critical path are working on bug tickets or other, smaller things that had to be done anyway. But if they don't get done, it's not going to block the main delivery. And that we found was really effective because you never get blocked on the critical path if you've only got one critical path. If you have 3 or 4 critical paths, it's easy to get deadlocked where you can't make progress on any of them because all of the people working on them are blocked waiting for someone else to finish something they need.
It's interesting because I think I've never heard anybody like talk about having almost that spare capacity focused on the bug or fixes or the upkeep or whatever those things are, the maintenance things. And I think that's really interesting because they're there and you have to do them anyways. And if you don't plan a little bit of slippage or time in there to be able to manage that, then you'll never hit your sprints. Like you'll never get the deliverables because you're not resource allocating properly. So that's really cool. I've never come across it. How did you notice that, or how did you come up with? that understanding?
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple of factors that weigh in here. The first time I heard the word critical path, so critical path is taken straight out of project management. So when you link together all the dependencies in a project, and it could be any sort of project, not just software, but software projects are some of the more complex. So great examples. But you have these critical paths that form where the length of time it takes to build a large building, for example, is dictated by a critical path through the project of the things that depend on each other. I mean, you can't put the top floor in until you've built all the floors underneath, which then relies on the foundation and so forth. And so how long it takes to do each of those components determines how long you have to wait until you do the next component of the critical path. And I first heard this terminology actually from my mum, who was a what they used to call an analyst programmer back in the day, and then she went on to be a manager of a quite a large team. And yeah, this is classic project management methodology. It was used in the days of waterfall projects when everything was done, and it's not the way we do things now, but the reality of space and time and so forth hasn't changed. So even if you're working agile and keeping some optionality and doing this sprint system, you still need to think about the critical path. And so taking this and then a great video that someone shared of this team of people passing balls around between them. And the metaphor there is if everybody has a ball in both hands and you try and pass the balls around rapidly, you start dropping balls. If some people have their hands empty and you have, say, one ball, meaning there's one project that we're all working on, you can actually pass the ball really rapidly and the ball can go through a lot of hands very quickly. It's the metaphor of getting more done.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much for sharing that because I think that's something I don't think we've actually had a conversation on the show about it. And so I'm excited to get it out and share with our network. And so that kind of sets up what's the one thing that our network can help you with over the next little bit?
I am really keen to meet more people in the US, especially larger enterprises that want to solve important cybersecurity problems very, very well. So specifically around cyber defense, which is what we do. So if your organization is trying to solve a cyber defense problem and you're finding that your tools are getting in the way, or it's too complicated, or you've got a team of mixed experience levels or mixed levels of trust, we build a platform that can help with that. We're at this stage trying to learn more about what organizations in the US need, what they want, what their security objectives are, so that we can better design a solution to fit that problem. So yeah, very keen to hear from anyone.
Give me an example of that company. Who are they? How big? Who do they service? What's their industry?
All right, say if you're in a regulated industry, so for example, in some parts of the US, critical infrastructure or financial services, maybe the organization handles a large amount of money, or they're handling a lot of personally identifying information. A lot of healthcare networks are doing this, and just finding they're overwhelmed with alert fatigue in their security operations team. There seems to be a lot of hacker activity going on. Most of it is false alarms. People are burning out, high turnover, struggling to meet the demands of perhaps even multiple regulatory regimes. That classic sort of cyber defense logjam that so many organizations find themselves in. We're really keen to learn more about the challenges you're facing and obviously to see if we can help.
Well, we will set that up and send it out. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know it's super early there, so thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to following along on your journey.
Thanks for having me, David. It's been great.